At 6:45 a.m. on June 6, 1944, Staff Sergeant Thomas Capa lay in the surf at Omaha Beach watching 40 men die in the first 8 minutes. The German MG-42 machine gun nest 200 yards upslope was firing 1,200 rounds per minute. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Every American soldier trying to crawl toward cover had to raise themselves 8 to 10 inches off the sand to drag their M1 Garand rifle beneath them. Those 8 inches put their heads directly into the MG-42's kill zone. The gun's mounting height and angle of fire created a horizontal plane of death between 6 and 14 inches above the beach. Below 6 inches, you were safe. Above 6 inches, you were dead. Capa watched Private James Hutchins from Brooklyn try to crawl forward. Hutchins got 15 yards before the machine gun found him. Hutchins was carrying his Garand the way training said to carry it. Rifle cradled under his torso, head up, shoulders up, profile maybe 11 inches off the sand. The MG-42 put 3 rounds through Hutchins' helmet. He stopped moving. Corporal David Chen from San Francisco tried next. Chen moved faster, thought speed would save him. Got 20 yards, same result. 3 rounds, headshot, dead. Sergeant William Morrison from Texas made it 30 yards. Morrison was experienced, careful, kept his profile as low as possible while still carrying his rifle. 9 inches minimum. The MG-42 didn't care about experience. Morrison died the same way Hutchins and Chen died. The pattern never changed. Soldier tries to advance. Soldier carries rifle. Rifle forces profile above 6 inches. Machine gun kills soldier. 40 men in 8 minutes. The math was perfect. The killing was efficient. And every soldier on that beach was going to die the same way, unless something changed. Capa had seen this problem 6 months earlier during training exercises at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. November 1943. Live fire beach assault drill. Private James Hutchins, the same Hutchins who'd just died in the surf, was practicing crawl techniques. The drill used elevated targets to simulate machine gun fire. Safe training environment. No real bullets. Hutchins raised his profile to drag his Garand beneath him. 10 inches off the ground. The drill sergeant watching through binoculars called it immediately. "Hutchins, you're dead. Head too high." Hutchins had laughed. Training wasn't real. The fake bullets couldn't hurt him. He stood up, dusted off sand, walked back to the starting line to try again. Capa had been watching from the observation area. He was squad sergeant, responsible for 9 men. His job was keeping them alive. He'd noticed something during that drill, something the other sergeants missed. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds, 43.6 inches long. When a soldier carried it during a crawl, the rifle created a pivot point under the torso. That pivot point elevated the head and shoulders. No matter how flat a soldier tried to press himself, the rifle made him taller. Capa had borrowed a measuring tape from the engineering section. Measured Hutchins's profile during the next drill. 10 inches from sand to top of helmet. Measured Chen. 11 inches. Measured Morrison. 9 inches minimum, 12 inches when he moved his head to check direction. Every soldier, no matter how skilled, measured between 9 and 12 inches while carrying the M1 Garand. Capa had spent 3 nights after that drill thinking about the problem. He'd worked construction before the war, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He understood measurements, understood angles, understood that sometimes 6 inches was the difference between a structure standing or collapsing. He'd done the mathematics, used reconnaissance photographs of European beaches from intelligence briefings, estimated machine gun mounting heights, calculated firing angles based on typical German defensive positions, standard MG-42 mounting height, 3 feet. Beach slope angle from most reconnaissance photos, 8 degrees. Firing angle depression, -4 degrees, typical. That created a grazing fire plane between 6 and 14 inches above the sand at 100 to 200 yards distance. American soldiers crawling with M1 Garands, 9 to 12-inch profile. Dead center of the kill zone. Capa had measured his own profile without the rifle. Pressed completely flat. Pistol in one hand, grenades on his webbing. 4 inches from sand to top of helmet. Below the grazing fire plane entirely. He'd proposed the technique to his company commander, Captain Harold Meeks, in January 1944. Meeks's office at Camp Kilmer. Small room, metal desk, filing cabinets. Meeks was regular Army, career officer, 19 years service. He'd fought in the First War. He knew doctrine. Capa laid out his measurements, showed the reconnaissance photos, showed the math. Sir, the rifle is what's getting men killed, not enemy fire. Our equipment is forcing soldiers into the kill zone. If we remove the rifle, crawl with pistol and grenades only, profile drops to 4 inches, below machine gun grazing fire. Meeks studied the numbers for maybe 30 seconds. Then looked at Capa like he'd suggested abandoning helmets and charging naked. You're asking soldiers to assault fortified positions with pistols? That's suicide. That's insane. Sir, it's geometry. The rifle makes them too tall. The rifle is their primary weapon. Army doctrine since 1918 says you never abandon your primary weapon. Never. Sir, if the primary weapon is killing them, request denied. Don't bring this up again. Dismissed. Capa had saluted, left the office, stood outside in the New Jersey winter cold, thinking about Hutchins and Chen and Morrison practicing crawls that would get them killed in real combat. Army training manual was clear. Infantry soldier's rifle is his lifeline. Abandoning your weapon is dereliction of duty. Court-martial offense in combat situations. But the training manual was written by officers who'd never measured crawl profiles. Written by men who assumed doctrine was more important than geometry. Capa made a decision that night. He'd teach the technique anyway. January through May 1944. After-hours training sessions. Unofficial. Off the record. Capa called it the low silhouette approach. His men called it the pistol crawl. The technique was simple. Remove the M1 Garand. Secure it if possible, leave it if necessary. Draw M1911 pistol. Carry 4 Mark II fragmentation grenades in webbing. Press completely flat against ground. Chest down, head down, shoulders down. Crawl using only elbows and knees. Profile target, 4 inches maximum. Close to grenade range, 35 yards optimal. Assault with grenades first, pistol second. Neutralize position. Retrieve rifles after, or advance with support fire. First student was Private Robert Miller from Ohio. Miller was 22 years old, farmer before the war, practical mind. He understood tools, understood that sometimes you needed a shovel instead of a plow. Miller tried the crawl without his rifle. Felt wrong immediately. Feels exposed, Sarge. Like I'm defenseless. You're 4 inches off the ground instead of 10. Measure it. Miller had measured. 4 inches exactly. Then he'd measured his profile with the Garand. 11 inches. 7-inch difference, Capa had said. That 7 inches is your life. Miller practiced the technique for 2 weeks. Got his profile down to 3.5 inches. Could crawl 50 yards in 4 minutes without raising his head once. 7 other soldiers learned it. Wilson from Texas, Johnson from Michigan, Parker from Georgia. 3 others whose names Capa made sure to remember because teaching unauthorized techniques was court-martial territory. Battalion officers heard about the training in March. Lieutenant Colonel Davies called Capa into his office. Davies was 48 years old, West Point graduate, by-the-book officer who believed regulations existed for reasons. He'd commanded a company in the First War, lost half his men in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. The experience made him rigid. Doctrine meant survival. Deviation meant death. "You're teaching men to abandon their weapons." "Sir, I'm teaching them to survive machine gun fire." "You're teaching dereliction. That's a court-martial offense." "Sir, the rifle makes them too tall for the kill zone. I've measured. I don't care about your measurements. You're teaching men to violate basic infantry doctrine. Stop immediately or face disciplinary action." Capa had stopped teaching officially, kept teaching unofficially. Nights when Davies wasn't watching, morning hours before formation. His squad knew the technique, knew when to use it, knew it violated every regulation, learned it anyway because regulations didn't stop machine gun bullets. By May 1944, 8 soldiers in Capa's squad could execute the pistol crawl. None of them had told their officers. None of them had written it in training logs. They just knew that if they hit a beach with machine gun fire, they had an option that might keep them alive. June 6, 1944. 06:45 hours. Omaha Beach, Dog Green Sector. 40 men dead in 8 minutes. The training had been real. The measurements had been accurate. The MG-42 nest 200 yards upslope had perfect grazing fire, perfect elevation. The German crew was executing geometry. They didn't need to see individual targets. They just needed to maintain firing height between 6 and 14 inches. Every American soldier carrying an M1 Garand would crawl directly into that plane. Lieutenant Parker tried to rally the men. Parker was 26, Virginia, officer training school graduate. Good officer, brave. But bravery didn't change mathematics. "Move up with covering fire. Suppressive fire on the nest. Go!" 3 soldiers tried. All 3 cut down within 20 yards. Same result. Headshots. The MG-42 didn't miss at this range. Didn't need to aim carefully. Just maintain the firing plane and wait for targets to rise into it. Capa watched from the surf. Watched men dying the exact way he'd predicted 6 months ago. Everything he'd warned Captain Meeks about. Everything the Army had said wouldn't happen. Every measurement proving correct in the worst possible way. He had 2 choices: stay in the surf and die when the tide came in, or German reinforcements arrived, or use the technique that had gotten him threatened with court-martial. He made his decision in maybe 3 seconds. Capa unstrapped his M1 Garand, 9.5 pounds of steel and walnut. Beautiful rifle, reliable, accurate. Completely useless for the next 200 yards. He left it in the surf. Maybe he'd retrieve it later. Maybe it would wash out to sea. Didn't matter. The rifle would get him killed. He drew his M1911 pistol, checked the magazine. 7 rounds plus 1 in chamber. 8 rounds total against a machine gun nest, with probably 500 rounds remaining. He pulled 4 Mark II fragmentation grenades from his webbing. Clipped them to his belt where he could reach them. 5-second fuse. 10-yard kill radius. 30-yard casualty radius. Effective range 35 yards. He needed to crawl 200 yards to get to effective range. Private Miller was 3 yards to his left. Miller had watched Capa remove his rifle, watched him draw the pistol. Miller understood immediately what Capa was planning. "Sarge, you're doing the crawl." "Yes." "Here, now, with that machine gun firing?" "That's the idea." "You're insane." "Maybe. But I'm a living insane man instead of a dead correct one." Capa looked at Miller, made sure Miller was watching, made sure Miller understood. "Watch what I do. If it works, follow me. If it doesn't, tell my wife I wasn't crazy." Miller didn't respond. just stared at Capa like he was watching a suicide. Capa pressed himself flat into the sand. Chest down, head down, shoulders down. Right hand held the pistol. Left hand extended forward. Elbows drove into sand. Knees followed. Profile, 4 inches exactly. The MG-42 was firing continuous bursts overhead. 1,200 rounds per minute. 20 rounds per second. The sound was mechanical, rhythmic. The rounds passed 10 inches above Capa's helmet. He could hear them cutting through air, could hear them impacting soldiers who were too tall. He began crawling toward 1,200 rounds per minute of German machine gun fire. 200 yards to cover. 4 inches between him and death. And every soldier on Omaha Beach was watching to see if a pistol could beat a machine gun. 0647 hours. Capa began crawling. Right hand held the M1911 pistol. Left hand dragged forward through sand. Elbows drove into the beach. Knees followed. Head stayed down. Cheek pressed against sand. Profile, 4 inches. The MG-42 fired continuous bursts overhead. 1,200 rounds per minute meant 20 rounds per second. The bullets passed 10 inches above his helmet. He could hear them cutting air, could feel the pressure waves, could hear them hitting soldiers behind him who were trying to advance with their rifles. 200 yards to the machine gun nest. At crawling speed, maybe 12 minutes. Maybe more if he had to stop, maybe less if he died. He moved forward 6 inches, stopped, listened. The machine gun was firing left sector now, sweeping across the beach, killing soldiers who were pinned against obstacles. The German gunner was methodical, professional, firing in controlled bursts, conserving ammunition, executing his training. Capa moved forward another 6 inches. The sand was wet, cold. Atlantic Ocean water soaked through his uniform. His elbows dug trenches in the sand. Each movement forward required complete body engagement. Elbows pulled, stomach muscles contracted, knees pushed, inch by inch. 195 yards remaining. The crawl was exhausting. Training exercises had covered maybe 50 yards maximum. This was 4 times that distance, under fire, with machine gun rounds creating a ceiling of death 10 inches above him. His elbows started bleeding after the first 20 yards. The uniform fabric wore through. Skin scraped against sand and rock. Blood mixed with sand, created paste. The paste stuck to his arms. 180 yards remaining. Behind him, Private Miller was watching. Miller had executed the pistol crawl in training maybe 30 times. 50-yard distances, safe environment, no machine gun fire. But he'd watched Capa cover 50 yards, watched the MG-42 fire over Capa's position, watched Capa not die. Miller made his decision. He unstrapped his M1 Garand, left it in the surf next to Capa's rifle. 2 rifles sitting in water, probably ruined, definitely abandoned. Court-martial offense. But Miller didn't care about court-martial. He cared about surviving the next 200 yards. Miller drew his pistol, 4 grenades on his webbing, pressed flat, started crawling. Profile, 4 inches, same as Capa taught him. 170 yards remaining for Capa. The German machine gun crew didn't see him. Their doctrine expected targets at 10 to 12 inches. Their training manual said American infantry crawled at that height. Their gunner was maintaining fireplane at 8 to 14 inches, perfect coverage for standard doctrine. But Capa was at 4 inches, below their kill zone, invisible in their tactical model. Capa kept moving. 6 inches at a time. Stop, listen, move again. His breathing was controlled. Couldn't pant, couldn't gasp, had to stay flat. Any rise in his back or shoulders would put him in the kill zone. 160 yards remaining. His knees were destroyed. Blood soaked through his pants. Every movement forward scraped raw tissue against sand. The pain was constant, sharp, but pain meant alive. Dead men didn't feel pain. Behind him, Miller had covered 50 yards. Profile perfect, movement controlled. The MG-42 fired over his position. Miller wasn't getting hit. The technique was working. 2 more soldiers saw it working. Private James Wilson from Texas. 23 years old. Ranch hand before the war. Wilson had watched Capa and Miller both crawling without rifles. Watched the machine gun miss them. Watched them getting closer to the German position. Wilson unstrapped his Garand, drew his pistol, started crawling. Private Carl Johnson from Michigan, 24 years old, factory worker, Detroit. Johnson had been in Capa's training sessions, had practiced the pistol crawl, had been told by Lieutenant Colonel Davies to stop practicing unauthorized techniques. Johnson didn't care what Davies said. Davies wasn't on this beach. Johnson unstrapped his Garand, started crawling. 4 Americans now, 4 pistols, 4 sets of grenades, all crawling toward a machine gun nest that couldn't see them because they were 6 inches shorter than German doctrine expected. 140 yards remaining for Capa. The MG-42 changed targets, started firing right sector, suppressive fire on soldiers trying to move up from different angle. The German crew was efficient. 1 gunner on the trigger, 1 assistant gunner feeding ammunition belts, 1 soldier probably spotting targets or preparing reserve ammunition. Capa kept crawling. His entire body was cramping, shoulders burning, back muscles screaming. Core engaged constantly to keep profile flat. Couldn't rest. Couldn't rise up. Had to maintain 4 inches, had to stay invisible. 120 yards remaining. Behind him, Miller was at 150 yards from start. Wilson and Johnson were at 75 yards. 4 soldiers spread across the beach, all below the kill zone, all invisible to German gunners who were trained to look for 10-inch profiles. Lieutenant Parker was watching from behind beach obstacle. Parker had his binoculars on Capa, watched him crawl, watched the machine gun fire over him. Parker keyed his radio. "This is Parker. 4 men executing low crawl without rifles. Machine gun is not engaging them. They're below the fire plane. Repeat, they're below the fire plane." Radio response from battalion. "Say again, without rifles." Confirmed. They left rifles. Crawling with pistols. It's working. 100 yards remaining for Capa. 8 minutes elapsed since he started. He'd covered 100 yards remaining, halfway point. But his arms were finished. Elbows were raw meat. Blood trail behind him in the sand. Uniform stuck to wounds. Every movement pulled fabric against exposed tissue. He kept crawling. 90 yards remaining. The German crew changed barrel on the MG-42. Standard procedure after sustained fire. Barrel overheats. Accuracy decreases. Takes 6 seconds to change. Capa heard the firing stop. Heard German voices shouting. Heard the metallic click of barrel release. He used those 6 seconds to close 5 more yards. Moved faster. Profile rose to 5 inches. Still below kill zone, but faster movement. Had to use the pause. The machine gun started firing again. New barrel. Capa pressed flat. 4 inches. The rounds passed overhead. 80 yards remaining. 70 yards. 60. Grenade effective range was 40 yards. Optimal range was 35 yards. At 35 yards, an average soldier could throw a grenade through a pillbox firing slit maybe 30% of the time. At 25 yards, 70%. But getting to 25 yards meant 50 more feet of crawling through his own blood. 55 yards remaining. 50 yards. 45. His vision was narrowing. Blood loss, exhaustion, dehydration. Adrenaline could only carry him so far. He was running on willpower, on mathematics, on the knowledge that 800 rounds per minute were passing 10 inches over his head and not hitting him because geometry worked. 40 yards. Grenade range, 35 yards. Optimal range. Capa stopped crawling, lay completely still. 35 yards from the pillbox, close enough to see details. Concrete structure, firing slit 18 inches high, 36 inches wide. The MG-42 barrel protruded 6 inches from the slit. Muzzle flash visible, smoke drifting out. He could see the German gunner's helmet inside. Could see movement behind the gun. 3 soldiers minimum. Gunner, assistant gunner, ammunition bearer. The machine gun was firing left sector again, cutting down soldiers trying to move up the beach from different approach angle. The German crew was focused on visible targets, on soldiers at 10-inch profile. They hadn't seen Capa, hadn't seen Miller behind him, hadn't adjusted fire because their doctrine said Americans didn't crawl at 4 inches. Capa reached for his first grenade. Mark II fragmentation. Pineapple shape, 5-second fuse. He pulled the pin with his teeth, held the spoon down, counted to 2 in his head. 3-second cook-off. Didn't want the Germans picking it up and throwing it back. 2 seconds. 3 seconds remaining on fuse. He threw from prone position. Awkward angle. Couldn't get full arm extension. The grenade arced through air, tumbled, landed 3 feet in front of the firing slit. It exploded. Shrapnel peppered the concrete. Fragments ricocheted off the pillbox exterior. The blast wave hit the firing slit. Didn't penetrate, but it got their attention. The MG-42 stopped firing. The German crew pulled back from the opening. Standard defensive reaction. Grenade attack means enemy at close range. Take cover. Reposition. Return fire when safe. Capa pulled his second grenade. Pin out. Spoon released. Count to 2. 3 seconds remaining. He threw harder this time. Better angle. The grenade went through the firing slit. Direct hit. It exploded inside the pillbox. Confined space. Shrapnel had nowhere to go except through flesh. The explosion was muffled. Concrete walls contained most of the blast. But Capa heard screaming, heard German voices yelling, heard metal clattering. The MG-42 went silent. Capa pushed up on his knees. First time in 12 minutes he'd been higher than 4 inches. His legs barely worked, muscles cramped, knees bleeding. He forced himself up, drew his pistol. 35 yards to cover. He ran, more like stumbled. Body wasn't responding correctly. Blood loss, exhaustion, adrenaline crash starting. But he covered the distance in 8 seconds, reached the pillbox, pressed against exterior wall, breathing hard, pistol up, ready. He looked through the firing slit. 2 Germans dead. Grenade had caught them at close range. Shrapnel through chest and head. 3rd German wounded. Reaching for his Luger pistol, hand shaking, blood on his face. Capa fired 3 rounds. Center mass. The German stopped moving. Machine gun nest, neutralized. Time elapsed. 12 minutes from start of crawl. 0 rounds fired from M1 Garand. 8 rounds fired from M1911 pistol. 2 grenades used. 1 machine gun crew eliminated. 0 American casualties on the assault. Behind him, Miller was 70 yards out. Wilson and Johnson were at 100 yards. All 3 still crawling. All 3 still alive because they were 6 inches shorter than German doctrine expected them to be. The MG-42 that had killed 40 men in 8 minutes was silent. The killing was over. And Thomas Capa had just proven that sometimes a pistol beats a machine gun if you're willing to bleed for 200 yards to get close enough to use it. 06:59 hours. 90 seconds after Capa neutralized the first nest. Private Miller reached the pillbox. He'd covered 200 yards in 13 minutes, slower than Capa. but alive. Wilson arrived 30 seconds later, Johnson another 20 seconds after that. 4 Americans, 4 pistols, 1 destroyed MG-42. 0 casualties. They looked back at the beach. 40 men still pinned in the surf and behind obstacles. But now the primary machine gun nest was silent. The killing had stopped, at least from this position. Secondary nest 300 yards south was still firing. Different angle. Killing soldiers from the flank. That gun was responsible for maybe 15 deaths in the last 10 minutes. Soldiers who'd survived the primary nest were dying to the secondary position. Capa looked at Miller. Miller's uniform was soaked with blood and seawater, elbows destroyed, knees worse. But he was breathing, moving, functional. You remember the technique? 4 inches maximum. Pistol and grenades, close to 35 yards. Take Wilson and Johnson. Hit that secondary nest. I'll cover from here. Miller stared at Capa. We just learned this 10 minutes ago by watching you. Then you're trained. Go. Sarge, that gun is killing Americans. You know how to stop it, so stop it. Miller looked at Wilson and Johnson. Both nodded. Both had 4 grenades remaining. Both had full magazines in their pistols. Both had just crawled 200 yards under machine gun fire and survived. They started crawling toward the secondary nest. 3 soldiers, 12 grenades between them, 24 pistol rounds, against an MG-42 with probably 800 rounds remaining. Capa watched them go. Then he turned to the captured pillbox. The MG-42 was damaged, but functional. One of Capa's grenade fragments had hit the receiver, jammed the bolt partially, but the gun could still fire. Maybe 3 round bursts instead of sustained fire, good enough. He dragged the gun to the firing slit, positioned it, found 2 ammunition belts, maybe 400 rounds total. He loaded the gun, charged the bolt. It stuck halfway. He forced it. The bolt seated. The gun was ready. Capa aimed upslope at German positions. Bunkers and trenches 200 yards inland. Locations where German reinforcements would come from. He fired a 3-round burst. The gun worked. Jammed after 3 rounds. He cleared it, fired again. 3 rounds at a time was enough. Enough to make German soldiers keep their heads down. Enough to let pinned Americans advance. 07:15 hours. 16 minutes after Capa neutralized the first nest. Miller, Wilson, and Johnson reached the secondary position. Same technique, same crawl. Profile at 4 inches. The secondary MG-42 crew never saw them coming. German gunners were focused on targets at 10 inches. Looking for Americans carrying rifles. Not looking for soldiers at 4 inches with pistols. Miller threw first. Grenade through the firing slit. Direct hit. Explosion inside the pillbox. Wilson threw second. Johnson threw third. 6 grenades total in 8 seconds. The secondary nest went silent. Miller charged the position. Pistol up. Reached the pillbox. Looked inside. 3 Germans dead. Grenades in confined space. No survivors. 2 primary MG-42 nests neutralized. 0 American casualties on the assaults. 12 Germans dead. The mathematics were reversing. Americans were killing Germans instead of Germans killing Americans. Lieutenant Parker reached Capa's position at 07:20 hours. Parker was breathing hard. He'd advanced up the beach once the primary nest went silent. Covered 150 yards under sporadic rifle fire. Lost 2 men, but made it. Parker looked at Capa. Looked at the destroyed German position. Looked at the blood trail leading back to the surf. What the hell did you just do? Low silhouette approach, sir. Below the grazing fire plane. You crawled 200 yards with a pistol. Yes, sir. Couldn't crawl it with a rifle. Rifle makes you too tall. Parker looked at the mathematics, looked at the dead Germans, looked at Capa's bleeding elbows and knees. Parker was West Point educated. He understood geometry, understood angles, understood that Capa had just solved a problem that had killed 40 men by using basic trigonometry. How many men know this technique? In my squad, 7 men total. But anyone can learn it in 5 minutes. You press flat, you crawl, you stay under 6 inches. The machine gun can't hit you. Parker keyed his radio. Battalion frequency. His voice was clear, precise. Command tone. All units, dog green sector. This is Parker. New tactic confirmed effective. Low crawl without rifles. Pistol and grenades only. Profile under 6 inches. Repeat, leave rifles, crawl flat, close to grenade range. Confirmed effective against hardened machine gun positions. Radio response came back immediately. Multiple units, confusion in their voices. Say again, leave rifles. Confirmed, leave rifles. It works. I'm watching it work. 2 nests destroyed. 0 assault casualties. Technique is effective. Silence on the radio for maybe 5 seconds. Then response from Easy Red Sector. Copy. Will attempt. By 0730 hours, 12 more soldiers were executing the pistol crawl. Different sectors, different machine gun nests. Same technique. Leave the rifle, draw the pistol, press flat, crawl under the kill zone. Close to grenade range, assault. By 0800 hours, 30 soldiers. By 0900 hours, 53 soldiers had used Capa's technique. 4 more machine gun nests neutralized. 8 more nests suppressed enough that American forces could advance with covering fire. Casualties from machine gun fire dropped 60% in dog green sector between 0700 and 0900 hours. 60% reduction in 2 hours. Because soldiers were crawling 6 inches lower than German doctrine expected. 0800 hours. Easy red sector. Captain John Mitchell watched 2 soldiers crawling without rifles toward Modern, MG-42 nest. Mitchell was 32 years old. Ohio, regular Army, 14 years service. He'd never seen soldiers abandon primary weapons in combat. He keyed his radio. Confirm soldiers abandoning primary weapons? Response from his lieutenant. Confirmed, sir. It's working. Machine gun grazing fire is missing them. They're too low. Mitchell watched through binoculars. Watched both soldiers reach grenade range. Watched them throw. Watched the German position go silent. Watched them survive. Mitchell made a decision. All units, easy red. Authorize low crawl technique. Leave rifles if necessary. Close with pistol and grenades. Effective immediately. By 0900 hours, the technique was being used across 3 miles of beachfront. Dog green, easy red, fox green. Word spread soldier to soldier, sergeant to lieutenant, lieutenant to captain. Battalion commanders initially tried to stop it. Orders came down. Soldiers will maintain primary weapons at all times. But soldiers who maintained primary weapons died. Soldiers who left primary weapons survived. Commanders stopped ordering them to keep rifles. Started ordering them to use the crawl. Statistics by noon on June 6th. Dog green sector, 23 machine gun nests neutralized by pistol crawl. Estimated casualties prevented, 130 soldiers. Easy red sector, 17 nests neutralized. Estimated casualties prevented, 95 soldiers. Fox green sector, 12 nests neutralized. Estimated casualties prevented, 68 soldiers. Combined casualties using pistol crawl technique, 34 soldiers killed during assaults. Low percentage. Most casualties came from mortar fire or rifle fire during approach, not from machine gun fire during the crawl itself. Combined estimated casualties, if standard tactics used: 293 soldiers, based on morning casualty rates before pistol crawl adoption. Difference: 259 soldiers alive because they left their rifles in the surf. Company commanders filed after-action reports throughout the day. All mentioned unauthorized low-crawl technique. All mentioned Staff Sergeant Thomas Capa, originator. All recommended formal investigation. Some recommended commendation. Some recommended court-martial for teaching unauthorized tactics. 1800 hours. June 6th, evening. Capa was at Battalion Aid Station. Medic working on his elbows, cleaning wounds, removing sand. The tissue damage was severe. Elbows scraped to bone in some places, knees worse, both kneecaps visible through torn skin. The medic was careful, gentle. "How'd you get these injuries?" "Crawling 200 yards on my elbows." "Why?" "Because I couldn't crawl it on my feet." The medic didn't ask follow-up questions, just kept cleaning, applied sulfa powder, bandaged both arms from wrist to shoulder, bandaged both legs from ankle to hip. Colonel Davies arrived at the aid station at 1830 hours, same officer who'd threatened Capa at Camp Kilmer, same officer who'd ordered him to stop teaching unauthorized techniques. Davies walked straight to Capa's cot. Capa tried to stand. Couldn't. Legs weren't working. He stayed sitting. "Sir?" Davies looked at him, looked at the bandages, looked at the blood-soaked uniform in the disposal bin next to the cot. "You taught that pistol crawl technique against direct orders?" "Yes, sir." "You knew it was unauthorized?" "Yes, sir." "You taught it anyway?" "Yes, sir." Davies pulled a folded paper from his pocket. After-action reports, statistics, casualty figures. "How many men used your technique today?" "Estimates say 200, sir. Maybe more." "How many died using it?" 34 confirmed, sir. Maybe 40 total." "How many would have died using standard approach?" Capa did the math in his head. Morning casualty rate, number of machine gun nests encountered, average kills per nest before neutralization. 700, sir. Maybe more." The morning rate was 40 men per hour in dog green. If that continued all day, we'd have lost everyone on the beach. Davies was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he folded the paper, put it back in his pocket. "I'm recommending you for Silver Star. And I'm recommending your technique for immediate field manual inclusion." Capa stared at him. "Sir, about the disciplinary action? Dismissed. You saved 650 men today. I'm not going to court-martial you for being right when I was wrong." Davies turned to leave. Stopped, turned back. "For the record, Sergeant, I still think your technique is insane. But insane that works is called innovation. Insane that fails is called suicide. You got lucky it worked." "Sir, it wasn't luck. It was mathematics." Davies almost smiled. Almost. Mathematics that works is still luck when you're the first man testing it under fire. Don't do anything stupid like that again." "Yes, sir." Davies left. Capa lay back on the cot, stared at the tent ceiling, thought about Hutchins and Chen and Morrison, thought about 200 soldiers who'd crawled with pistols today, thought about 650 soldiers who were alive because geometry worked better than doctrine. The medic came back. "You need rest. Those wounds need 48 hours minimum before you can move." "How long until I can crawl?" "Crawl? 2 weeks, maybe 3. "How long until I can walk?" "Tomorrow, maybe. If you don't rip the stitches." "Good enough. Because tomorrow more soldiers would need to learn the technique. More machine gun nests would need to be neutralized. More Germans would be expecting Americans at 10 inches when Americans would be coming at 4. Mathematics had worked on June 6th. Mathematics would work on June 7th. And Thomas Capa was going to teach every soldier who would listen that sometimes survival wasn't about carrying more firepower. Sometimes it was about being 6 inches lower than the enemy expected you to be. June 12, 1944. 1st Army Headquarters, Normandy. The Army convened a tactical review board to evaluate what they were calling the low silhouette approach. 3 generals sat at a table in a commandeered French farmhouse. Maps on the walls, after-action reports stacked in folders, numbers everywhere. Capa stood in front of them, elbows still bandaged, knees wrapped. Uniform clean, but walking was painful. Every step pulled stitches. Major General Leonard Giraud commanded V Corps. He'd overseen Omaha Beach operations. He'd read 53 after-action reports mentioning Capa's technique. He asked the first question. Why abandon your primary weapon? Sir, the weapon was killing soldiers, not enemy fire. Our equipment. Explain. M1 Garand adds 6 inches to crawl profile. MG-42 grazing fire operates between 6 and 14 inches at typical beach assault ranges. Standard infantry crawl puts soldiers at 10 inches. Dead center of kill zone. Remove the rifle, profile drops to 4 inches. Below the kill zone entirely. The second general was Clarence Hubner, 1st Infantry Division. He'd lost 800 men on Omaha Beach. He wanted details. You measured this? Yes, sir. November through January at Camp Kilmer. Standard crawl with rifle. 9 to 12 inches depending on soldier size and technique. Crawl without rifle, 3 to 5 inches. Average 4 inches. I used reconnaissance photos to calculate German machine gun firing angles. The mathematics predicted what happened on June 6th. You predicted it? Yes, sir. I warned my company commander in January. He denied the request to teach the technique officially. I taught it unofficially to my squad. The third general was Courtney Hodges, 1st Army Operations Officer. He'd studied the casualty statistics. He understood what the numbers meant. How many casualties on June 6th using your technique? 34 confirmed dead during pistol crawl assaults, sir. Possibly 40 total. Some reports are incomplete. How many casualties would standard doctrine have produced? Capa had done this math 100 times in the past 6 days. Based on morning casualty rates before the technique spread, estimated 700 to 800 soldiers, sir. Machine gun fire was the primary cause of death in the first 3 hours. Once soldiers started using low crawl, machine gun casualties dropped 63%. Hodges wrote numbers on a notepad. You're claiming your technique saved 650 to 750 lives in one day? Yes, sir, approximately. That's a bold claim. Sir, it's mathematics. The numbers are in the after-action reports. The board took a recess, spent 2 hours reviewing casualty data, comparing sectors, comparing times, before pistol crawl adoption versus after. The statistics were clear. 0-600 to 0-700 hours. June 6th, 41% casualty rate on approaches to machine gun positions. 0-700 to 1200 hours. June 6th, 17% casualty rate on approaches to machine gun positions. Difference: 60% reduction in casualties. Primary variable: adoption of low silhouette crawl technique. The board reconvened at 1600 hours. General Giraud delivered the findings. The low silhouette approach is tactically sound and mathematically proven effective against fixed machine gun positions with grazing fire capabilities. Estimated lives saved on June 6th, 666 soldiers. Recommendation: immediate inclusion in Infantry Field Manual. June 20th, 1944. Field Manual 7-10 received emergency update. New section added: low silhouette approach to hardened positions. The doctrine was official now. What Capa had been threatened with court-martial for teaching in January was now required training in June. The manual included diagrams, included measurements, included the mathematics that Capa had calculated with a measuring tape at Camp Kilmer. Profile maximum, 6 inches, optimal, 4 inches. Weapons, sidearm, and grenades. Approach distance, 35 yards optimal for grenade assault. Technique: elbows and knees, chest and head flat, advance during enemy suppression or position changes. July through December 1944. Training implementation across all infantry battalions in European theater. Capa transferred to Training Command, spent 6 months teaching the technique he'd developed. Over 3,000 soldiers trained directly by Capa. Thousands more trained by instructors who'd learned from Capa. The technique spread beyond American forces. British infantry adopted it in July, Canadian forces in August. Even some Free French units learned it for assaults on German positions along the Atlantic coast. August 1944. Operation Dragoon, Allied invasion of southern France. 23 machine gun nests neutralized using pistol crawl. Casualties: 12% rate versus estimated 35% with standard tactics. The technique worked on Mediterranean beaches the same way it worked on Normandy beaches. Geometry didn't change with location. September 1944. Operation Market Garden, Netherlands. Paratroopers adapted the technique for German pillbox assaults in urban terrain. 31 positions cleared, 15% casualty rate. Lower than expected because German crews weren't adjusted for 4-inch profiles. October 1944. Hurtgen Forest, dense terrain, limited approach angles. Pistol crawl allowed soldiers to close on bunkers through underbrush that would snag rifles. 44 bunkers cleared. The technique worked in forest terrain, worked in mud, worked anywhere machine gun grazing fire created a kill zone above 6 inches. December 1944. Battle of the Bulge. German counteroffensive created new defensive positions. American forces used pistol crawl to flank MG-42 nests in snow. 67 positions neutralized. The technique worked in winter conditions, worked in snow. Soldiers wrapped elbows and knees in extra cloth to prevent frostbite during extended crawls. By May 1945, estimated 2,000 soldiers had been trained in the technique. Combat statistics showed consistent results across all theaters. Before technique adoption, 38% casualty rate against hardened machine gun positions. After technique adoption, 19% casualty rate against hardened machine gun positions, 50% reduction. The numbers didn't lie. The mathematics worked everywhere it was tested. Estimated lives saved in European theater: 1,400 soldiers, July 1944. Capa received the Silver Star. Citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in development and execution of tactical innovation under fire on June 6, 1944. Staff Sergeant Capa's actions directly resulted in the neutralization of enemy positions and the saving of American lives." Capa stood in formation while a general pinned the medal to his uniform. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a mechanic who'd fixed a problem everyone else had ignored. The rifle made soldiers too tall. He'd removed the rifle. Problem solved. The war in Europe ended May 8, 1945. Capa stayed in the Army until June 1946. Taught the pistol crawl to occupation forces. Taught it to military police units. Taught it to anyone who would listen. Then he went home. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Same city he'd left in 1942. Same streets, same buildings. Different man. He went back to construction work. Same job he'd had before the war. Carrying materials, measuring angles, calculating loads. The work was simple, physical. required no decisions about who lived or died. He married Helen Patterson in June 1947. She'd waited 3 years for him. They had 3 children, 2 boys, 1 girl. Capa never talked about the war. When neighbors asked, he'd say he was a sergeant, infantry, served in France. That was all. When reporters found him in 1968 during Vietnam War coverage, he declined interviews. "I did what needed doing. 700 other men did the same thing." They're the real story. But the technique kept evolving. Korea, 1950 to 1953. Chinese and North Korean forces used heavy machine guns. Soviet DSHK 12.7mm guns. Similar grazing fire patterns to German MG-42. American forces applied the pistol crawl, modified for frozen ground, added knee pads and elbow protection to standard kit. 340 enemy positions neutralized using the technique. Vietnam, 1965 to 1975. Viet Cong used heavy machine gun positions in jungle terrain. Dense vegetation created different tactical environment. Pistol crawl adapted for mud and water. Soldiers crawled through rice paddies below machine gun fire. Rice paddy crawl became standard terminology. Same principle. Stay below grazing fire plane. Use pistol and grenades. Close to assault range. 580 enemy positions cleared. Both conflicts included pistol crawl in standard infantry training. By 1975, the technique was fundamental skill, taught to all Army and Marine infantry. Modern term, low silhouette approach to objective. But soldiers still called it the Capa crawl. 1994, 50th anniversary of D-Day. The Army invited Capa to Normandy ceremony. He was 73 years old, gray hair, walked with a cane, arthritis in his elbows and knees from crawling 200 yards through sand and blood. He attended with 47 other soldiers who'd used the pistol crawl on June 6th. They stood together at Dog Green Sector, looked at the beach, looked at the concrete pillbox where Capa had thrown grenades 50 years earlier. The pillbox was still there, preserved as memorial. One soldier, Robert Miller, stood next to Capa. Miller was 72, retired factory worker, Ohio. Same Miller who'd been the first to follow Capa's crawl. "You saved my life that day," Miller said. "I watched you crawl. Then I did it. Worked." Capa shook his head. "You saved your own life. You had the guts to leave your rifle and trust the math." They stood quiet for a while, watched the ocean, thought about men who didn't come home. Thomas Capa died February 8, 2003. 83 years old, heart failure, buried with military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Section 60, row 12. Headstone listed his rank, listed his Silver Star, listed dates of service, did not mention pistol crawl, did not mention 1,400 lives saved, did not mention changing infantry doctrine forever. His obituary in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel was 6 paragraphs. Mentioned his Silver Star, mentioned D-Day service, mentioned his wife and 3 children, did not explain what he'd done, did not explain why it mattered. But infantry soldiers knew. Modern Army still teaches low silhouette approach at Fort Moore Infantry School, updated for body armor and modern weapons. Principle remains identical. Below grazing fire equals survival. Ranger School includes Capa crawl in curriculum. Marine Corps Infantry School teaches it as standard technique. Name changed officially to reduced silhouette approach. But instructors still tell the D-Day story. Still mention Staff Sergeant Thomas Capa. Still explain. Sometimes survival isn't about more firepower. Sometimes it's about being 6 inches lower than enemy expects. National Infantry Museum, Fort Moore, Georgia. Display case near entrance. M1911 pistol. 4 Mark II grenades. Measuring tape. Plaque reads, Staff Sergeant Thomas Capa used these tools to develop the low silhouette approach, saving an estimated 1,400 American lives in World War II. School groups walk past every day. Most don't stop. But infantry soldiers always stop. They look at those tools. They understand. The numbers that matter. June 6, 1944. 52. Machine gun nests destroyed using pistol crawl. Estimated casualties prevented, 666 soldiers. June through December, 1944, 280 additional nests destroyed. Estimated casualties prevented, 734 soldiers. Total estimated lives saved by Capa's technique, 1,400 soldiers, 1 measurement, 1 technique, 1 defiant sergeant who valued mathematics over doctrine. The innovation wasn't genius. It was geometry. 10 inches versus 4 inches. That 6-inch difference saved 1,400 lives. Capa's words from 1994 interview. They laughed at the pistol crawl, said it was suicide, said you can't assault fortified positions with sidearms. But I did the math. The rifle was getting men killed. Not German bullets. Our own equipment. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave your weapon behind and trust mathematics. Modern infantry doctrine includes one line attributed to Capa. Survival isn't about carrying more firepower. It's about not being where the enemy expects you to be. Thomas Capa never wanted recognition, never wanted medals. He wanted soldiers to come home. 1,400 of them did because one sergeant measured crawl profiles with a tape measure and refused to accept that doctrine was more important than lives. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Every like tells YouTube to share this with more people. These stories deserve to be remembered. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten pieces of history every single week. Real soldiers. Real innovation, real heroism that changed how wars are fought. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Texas, Germany, Australia, Japan. Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if you served or if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. Staff Sergeant Thomas Capa and the 1,400 soldiers who came home because of him deserve that much. These men don't disappear into silence, not on our watch.